Let's go back to Canberra. Joining us is Labor MP Josh Burns. Josh, so good morning, by the way. The Greens say they have improved what was a weak bill. Have they?
I think that there's been good constructive conversations across the parliament and that we were open to having negotiations with any member of parliament that wanted to constructively engage on the climate bill. That certainly meant that we were open to discussing the bill with the coalition, and it was Peter Dutton who ruled himself and the coalition out of those negotiations. And then we've had good conversations with the Greens and the crossbench to try and get a really good, solid piece of legislation through the parliament. And it looks like that's going to happen. And I think it's really important for our country, for our economy, for the thousands of jobs that it's going to create and for our future.
So are the Greens right to say that they improved it?
Well, I think that there's been good constructive suggestions that the Greens were pretty explicit about their request to ensure that it was a floor, not a ceiling, which was already contained in the bill, but they wanted to make it a bit more explicit, and I think that that's fine.
So what have they improved?
I don't think we should be shy. Well, I think we should. I don't think we need to be shy about the fact that we work constructively across the parliament, and there were amendments that were put forward by the crossbench and by the Greens, and we worked through those amendments like sensible adults. And it shouldn't be shocking to the Australian people that that's how government will operate. That we have a piece of legislation, we ask for ideas and for amendments, and then the ones that we think are acceptable and add to the bill and that won't take away from the policies that we took to the election, then we include them in the legislation. And I think even though our nationally determined contribution as part of Paris was already explicit, that every single time we increase our ambition on our emission reductions, that we can't go backwards, we have to go forwards. There was a request to make that a little bit more explicit in the bill, and I think that's a reasonable request, and we did it.
Regardless, you had to strike a deal with the Greens to gain their support. Adam Bandt says this is just round one. Will you have to do deals again?
Look, there's been a little bit of posturing and a little bit of political games. I mean, you know, it was pretty crafty of Mr. Bandt to bring all the press gallery to the press club, do a big long speech only to tell them that he's going to support our bill. So, look, there's obviously a bit of colour and movement around this, Pete, and that's fine. I think the most important thing, and I think the thing that Australians really care about and Australians asked for, was collaboration and getting things done. And that's what this bill will absolutely mean for Australia. We're going to take a huge, meaningful step forward on tackling climate change. And I think that's a really good thing and something I'm really proud of, and something that the Australian people asked for, and something that the Parliament is getting done.
Okay, well, as part of the Greens' wish list is to stop new coal and gas projects. Labor says it will support gas and coal for now. How long will that support continue for, though?
Well, look, we've been really clear about our policies, Pete. Our policies have been set out in the Powering Australia plan. Our real key focus is to grow new industries. We don't need to wait for a crisis. You know, obviously there is international demand changes, and over the next decade and 2 decades, the demand for different sorts of products are going to be there, and we have this amazing opportunity to capitalise on that. We have a desert the size of the Sahara and an offshore wind capability perhaps larger than any other nation on earth, Pete. We're already looking and investing in solar energy to export to Singapore to create potentially up to 20% of their energy needs. This is going to be so good for jobs, so good for our regions, so good for the Australian economy. This is about making sure that our economy has opportunity for Australian people, and I'm looking forward to what this will mean as we invest in new technology.
Okay, well, therein lies a trap that many in the Northern Hemisphere are seeing at the moment, that renewables are not causing or not allowing enough energy, so they have reverted back to nuclear. And we're looking at France here, we're looking at Germany here. The Liberal Party here now want nuclear to form part of the conversation, at least get it underway. Should there at the very least, be a conversation about its role in the future? And we're not talking about these big old school reactors. Technology has changed here.
Well, there's a couple of things to say on that, Pete. First of all, I was in the inquiry with the now Shadow Minister Ted O'Brien in the Environment and Energy Committee that had a good look at this last term. And one of the things that was clear is that those large-scale nuclear reactors are too expensive. It will take around 10 to 12 years at least to build one nuclear reactor in Australia, and we're talking about tens of billions of dollars. So, you know, unless Peter Dutton wants to send our electricity
but I don't
bills
think we're
through the
talking
roof.
about that.
You know,
I mean,
yeah.
technology.
So then the
changed.
conversation goes to So then the conversation goes to these concepts of small modular reactors, where there actually isn't an example of small modular reactors already in operation, where they've been built in a factory and then been rolled out as a modular product anywhere in the world. It just isn't in existence yet. Now, if that dramatically reduces the cost of nuclear energy, which there is no evidence yet to suggest that it has, then of course we look at it. But NuScale has pushed back the release of their small modular reactor almost 4 years. They're struggling with a lot of finance. AEMO under the Morrison government said that they don't see any evidence that it's going to make it significantly cheaper. And I think the jury's still out. So we've had the conversation. It's really expensive, and Peter Dutton needs to explain why he wants to send power bills of Australia through the roof.
Well, nuclear technology to an extent is already being used in Sydney, and it's used primarily for health reasons. So is that an example where something can at least be explored?
I think that's a really good point, Pete. I mean, we have a nuclear reactor in Australia. I've actually looked inside of it. It's a pretty amazing piece of engineering where we have this big open water reactor in Lucas Heights.
So why not expand that?
Because it is different technology to have a very small nuclear reactor, like what we've got in Lucas Heights, versus a much larger nuclear reactor that would be required to produce energy. And of course, there are also different types of nuclear reactors that we're looking to explore as part of the AUKUS arrangement for nuclear-powered submarines. It's different technology. It requires different expertise, and ANSTO themselves have said that Australia doesn't have the expertise in Australia yet to be able to manage that. So it's a really costly exercise. Ultimately, it's not about the technology, Pete. It's about the economics of this. And I don't think Peter Dutton's been upfront about how much extra he wants Australians to pay if he's going to pursue this technology for energy needs, like what he's saying he will.
Okay. Josh Burns, thanks for your time this morning.